Welcome to Humanities 214. I'm Ellen Holmes Pearson, Professor of History and Humanities 214 instructor.
And I am Dennis Lundblad, Humanities Program Lecturer. Most of you took Humanities 124, and Dr. Pearson and I are here to help provide a conceptual bridge between the ancient and pre-modern worlds.
You learned about communities and communal obligations in Humanities 124. And don't close that door quite yet, because community is a key word for us in Humanities 214 as well. We will continue to explore the kinds of communities that emerged from the experiences of the ancient era and how they changed over time.
We are going to give you a couple of examples of how themes that touch on community, ones that were addressed in Humanities 124, will reappear in Humanities 214. You might remember from your Humanities 124 class that one of the communities we discussed was ancient Israel. One of the things that distinguished the ancient Israelites as a culture was their understanding of their relationship as a community with the divine. Their understanding was different from many other ancient societies in that rather than only being recipients of divine regulation, their relationship with their God was covenantal. They were engaged in an agreement with God in which both they and God would have expectations and obligations. God expected their worship and obedience. They expected God to lead and guide them, and hopefully that God would bring them safety and prosperity. Interestingly, when safety and prosperity were in question, this unique relationship always caused the ancient Israelites to examine their own recent behavior to see whether they were in compliance with the covenant. An equivalent concept might be a contract or a treaty. There are at least two participants, and each participant owes and is owed certain things to and from the other participants. This idea turns up over and over again since that time, and we see it in Humanities 214 and again in Humanities 324 when the notion of a social contract is examined.
Dennis, can we apply these same concepts of covenant as a contract between God or gods and the people to other religions? For example, would this concept apply to concepts of karma and reincarnation in Buddhist or Hindu religions?
In these religions, followers were not really given an option to participate, but rather they were presented with an already determined process by which the universe works. As we learned in Humanities 124, both Hindus and Buddhists believe in reincarnation. This cycle of rebirth in which souls are reincarnated is called samsara, which is a Sanskrit word meaning world, as well as wandering or passing through. And in this context, it means the repeated cycle of death and rebirth. This cyclical change is tied to the concept of karma, that every action not only has a cause, but it also has an inevitable reaction. And these consequences carry over from one life to another.
We will encounter these concepts of karma and samsara in Hindu and Buddhist texts throughout Humanities 214. For example, in the story of the parrot chick's rewards for devotion to Buddha, and the anecdote of Srimati, in which two sages' misdeeds are rewarded with misfortune in subsequent lives. We will also examine an artifact, the Wheel of Samsara, which illustrates the Buddhist theory about how the wheel of existence in this world works over the endless cycles of death and rebirth. The wheel, which is also known as Bhava Chakra, meaning the circle of emotion or attachment, depicts 6 realms through which cycles of death and rebirth pass, from gods to humans to animals. These 6 realms are interconnected, and everyone cycles through these realms as they cycle through their reincarnations. The journey through these realms is driven by the 3 poisons, or visha, located in the circle at the center of the wheel: desire or attachment, aversion or hatred, and delusion or ignorance. These poisons are the reasons for our rebirth in samsara, or this world, and they lead to good or bad karma or actions. The focus was on getting out of this illusory, transient world, this cycle of samsara. That's why the wheel is held by a figure symbolizing impermanence. Followers were motivated to perform righteous acts because if they were dutiful, they could attain moksha or nirvana and be released from this endless cycle of rebirth and death. Bottom line, doing your earthly duty well over the course of your lives meant eventually getting out of this wheel. Note that karma is represented as a potter because, like a potter shapes objects on his wheel, we shape our lives and our future lives through our actions.
And remember the references to God as a potter in the Hebrew Bible. The word for potter is linked to the idea of creation in the Genesis story, when God formed man out of the clay. From time to time, the ancient Hebrews saw themselves as available to be shaped anew by the potter who made them in the first place. It's a very meaningful image.
Ah, yes, intriguing commonality. Another visual reminder of the role of karma in Buddhism is the prayer wheel. Similarly to the wheel of samsara, these prayer wheels are physical manifestations of the phrase, turning the wheel of Dharma, which describes the way in which the Buddha taught. The wheels were used to help the illiterate to chant the sutra. In this prayer wheel from Nepal, the karmic knot, an endless knot, is at the center, which symbolizes the interlinking of cause and effect, and it illustrates the centrality of that idea within the Buddhist religion. With these texts, we can explore questions about how an individual's karma could benefit or be a detriment to the larger community. Are there similarities between these concepts of samsara and karma and the Hebrew concept of covenant?
I do see some commonalities between the idea of covenant and the concepts of samsara and karma. Both offer clear ideas of what is expected of their followers, and both include an obligation to fulfill these expectations. For Hindus and Buddhists, the choice is in how they perform their actions, and the process of samsara, of our cyclical passage through the world, developed into a means of social organization. As Krishna explains to the conflicted Arjuna on the battlefield, he has to perform his duty, that's dharma, and act, which is karma. The inevitability of the process, the idea that they have no choice but to participate in the process of life and afterlife, is something that they share with medieval Christianity.
But later, we see some forms of choice reappear in Christianity, don't we? I'm thinking about the idea that good works, kindness, and charity would open the door to heaven. Of course, these Christian values could also be considered a means of social organization. Convincing wealthy folks that they could get to heaven through works of charity helped ease the community's obligation to take care of the poor.
And those obligations to the poor can also be found in the writings of Moses ben Maimonides, or Rambam, as he came to be known. Rambam not only clarified the ideas about taking care of the poor from the books of Leviticus and Deuteronomy in the Hebrew Bible, he even went so far as to define levels of charitable giving. He identified 8 distinct levels, beginning with the one who finds the needy person a job, all the way down to the one who gives, but only inadequately and unhappily. These ideas begin in the ancient period, but the rabbis develop and systematize them throughout both periods.
Toward the end of Humanities 2:14, we'll examine Rambam's interpretations of the Hebrew Bible, and we'll also explore English attitudes toward charity and taking care of the poor, both before and after the passage of poor laws in the late 16th century. Again, these laws represent an important kind of social organization. Where do you see the similarities and differences in these regulations, Dennis?
Well, historically, the Jewish tradition has been that the poor should be left with some dignity. There's an old story about Rabbi Hillel helping a man who had once been rich. The man had been accustomed to having a chariot driver to haul him around, so Hillel paid for a driver. And when he could no longer afford that, he drove the man around himself. The English poor laws don't seem to be so concerned with that aspect of charity. Both systems were codified efforts to provide relief to the poor, but the English poor laws seemed to criminalize poverty, while the Jewish tradition tended to see the poor as victims of circumstance and opportunities to imitate divine compassion. That idea is carried forward into Christianity, at least in theory.
Well, we've taken this one theme of community from Humanities 124 all the way through to the end of Humanities 214. But don't be surprised if along the way other connections occur to you. A few more overarching questions that we could address. What tensions emerged within these communities? And how did the pull of individual interests affect these communities?
We can also continue to explore what it meant to lead a good life, a concept you examined in Humanities 124, and how that concept played into being a good member of a community. Certainly, you and your colleagues will come up with questions of your own as well. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in Humanities.